Please join me in giving Dr. Douglas Girod a warm Pachyderm Club welcome.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very kind introduction and largely true. But we won't go into that. It's a great pleasure to be here today, and I was just listening to that lineup of talks, your recent ones and the ones that are coming up, and what an incredible array of discussions. Just fascinating. I'm actually excited to go to your website and your Facebook page and look at some of those. I wish we were here to be able to join you every week. It's very impressive. And I was asked today to come talk a little bit about KU Medical Center, and I think what I find as I go around the state of Kansas is we're a very confusing organization. A lot of people don't understand who we are and what we do, including people on our own campus. So you're not alone if that's the case for you. But what I thought I'd try to do today is do a little bit of a high view of what the medical center is, what we do, what our missions are, and then end up talking a little bit more in a very Wichita-specific fashion about the School of Medicine here in Wichita and its history and what it's accomplished and what our aspirations are for that campus here in Wichita within this community. So with that, what the medical center consists of, and I'm going to start talking about our main campus in Kansas City, which is where we started historically, actually in 1905. So we are 110 years old. School of Medicine is. We've been in our current location in Kansas City since about 1921, and then our growth has been from there over the years. But we're really a conglomerate of multiple different entities on that campus. I represent the University of Kansas Medical Center, which is really the university side of activities. But our faculty, our clinical faculty, practice within the University of Kansas Physicians, which is a faculty practice group of almost 800 physicians at this point in time. And then the University of Kansas Hospital, which is also a state-owned agency. It's a public authority, so its board of directors is appointed by the governor, but it really functions largely as a state-owned private not-for-profit. And neither the hospital nor the physicians group has any state support behind it, but certainly the university side does. And so I'll speak mostly about the university side of things. And on the medical center, we have 3 schools, as John mentioned. We have the School of Medicine, we have the School of Nursing, and we have the School of Health Professions. And health professions includes things like physical therapy and occupational therapy, speech and language pathology, radiology technology, respiratory therapy, a broad spectrum of programs within that school. Our School of Medicine has 3 campuses, and we have our Kansas City campus about 40 years ago, over 40 years ago actually. The Wichita campus started, and we'll talk about that some more. And then much more recently, our Salina campus, which is only 4 years old, and it is a effort to help supply physicians to rural Kansas. And it is the smallest 4-year medical school campus in the world. It has 8 students per class for 4 years of medical school. All of that done within Salina. So very interesting, graduated their first class this year and did very well. We also have a very large research enterprise, and I list that separately because that's very cross-cutting. It's within all our schools, it's within all our campuses, and it's also within research institutes that don't really fall necessarily into one of these, such as our Cancer Center and our Frontiers program, which is a clinical and translational science award. So our research engine is a big part of what we do, as we'll talk about a little bit as well. You mentioned our community engagement, and we do take this very seriously. We are the only state medical school, and we take that mission very, very seriously. And so we do a lot of outreach across the state of Kansas. In fact, if you go to the KUMC website to community engagement, there's an interactive map there, and you can click on any county in the state of Kansas. There's 105 counties in the state, and we are active in all 105 counties. And that can be anywhere from sending students out there for rotations to sending residents out there to cover a physician's practice so they can actually take a vacation, which is hard to do if you're the only doc in town, to helping them recruit physicians into those communities, to running programs in the high schools. We run pipeline programs. We call it a night lab at the high school, where we help science teachers get kids interested in science and technology. so many different activities that occur out across the state. We run some specialty clinics out there to help get specialists out to where the patients are, and then we have a very active and one of the oldest telemedicine programs in the country, actually, to do a lot of consultations by telemedicine. So I'm going to talk about each of these missions a little bit just to give you some background. And you heard that we have our 3 schools, and we have about 3,300 students or learners within the School of Medicine. And that includes about 800 residents. Residents that's what you do after you graduate medical school. You go to college, then you go to medical school, you get a diploma, but you actually can't do anything with that. You have to go through a residency before you can get a medical license and actually go out and practice medicine. So we have about 800 residents within the system. 250 of those are right here in Wichita that do their residency training here. And then it's after that they can actually go out and start to practice medicine. We also train physician scientists, the next generation of scientists, both physician scientists but also PhD scientists, biomedical researchers, and are producing those for the state and the region and the world for that matter. The School of Nursing has almost 700 students in it, and a big part of our School of Nursing, and the one thing that our School of Nursing does, different than other schools of nursing across the state, of which we have several very good ones, is that we do a lot of the graduate work. So we train PhD nurses, we advanced practice nurses, certified nurse anesthesia program, and master's degrees both in administration and clinical specialties. So a big part of our School of Nursing is really on that graduate side, a lot of which actually occurs online as well. So we're able to work with working nurses and let them even stay where they're at across the state and work on those advanced degrees in large part. I mentioned a number of the different programs in health professions. Again, about 600 students in that school, and most of those are graduate programs. Most are master's level or doctorate programs, but some of those are undergraduate and certificate programs as well. And our education, as we view our education, is really to meet the needs of the state, really the workforce needs of the state. And as a state, we have some challenges around this. I'm just going to talk on the physician side. We could talk about nursing, we could talk about health professions, and it would be essentially the same conversation. But when you look at the state of Kansas, we are 40th out of the 50 states in the number of physicians that we have per capita. So we don't have a lot of docs to start with. And then when you look at a map like this, it's really a distribution map. If you see a county up here, that's white, that's a county that has in primary care, and this is from KDHE's survey of 2014, if that county is white, they have about the number of primary care docs that they need. If the county is blue or dark blue, they're either underserved, critically underserved, or completely unserved in terms of primary care. So you can see we also have a pretty significant distribution problem of our physicians out across the state. We also know that we're not a young workforce, and I include myself in this comment, that within the next decade or so, about 30 to 35% of our workforce is going to retire. And so we're starting not from a great place. We have a serious distribution problem, and we need to be pumping almost 300 physicians a year into the state of Kansas if we're even going to get close to a national average in terms of number of physicians. And so that's a very big issue, and we take that very seriously and have made some efforts along those lines and hope to continue to do so. So this information, the numbers have actually gotten worse since we started this project in 2005. We started doing the workforce studies to try and figure it out and map out the future. And it takes quite a while these wheels don't turn quickly when you try and modify medical education and expansion. There's a lot of regulatory hoops you have to jump through. But that was a big part of what we did in 2011, which was to create the Salina campus that I mentioned, to specifically address rural parts of the state, but also to start a new effort here in Wichita. Historically, this campus was a 2-year campus. Students would do their first 2 years in Kansas City, and then a portion of them, 65, 70 of them, would leave Kansas City and come to Wichita for their final 2 years, which were largely clinical, working with the medical community here, which has been tremendously supportive of that, to help them get their clinical education. Well, in 2011, we started a 4-year campus as well. So now we have students that are starting in Wichita in their first year and going all the way through in Wichita. We didn't have a lot of room, so that started out with 8 students the first year and currently runs about 28 students for those first 2 years, and that's about all we have capacity for right now. But our long-term plan is to go to a full 4-year campus in this town, so that we would have every student that finishes here starts here, so we'd have 60 or 70 students doing all 4 years right here in Wichita. And then that would allow us to expand the number of students that we're training, and it would allow us to expand the number that we're training in Kansas City as well. So overall, it would help us, again, move a little bit closer to what we need to do to meet the needs of the state in the future. I would just comment that and I'll talk about budget stuff in a little bit, but we certainly managed to do that. It wasn't easy, but it was with a lot of community support that we managed to do that without any additional support from the state. I mentioned research, and our research engine in the state has grown significantly over the last decade or so. We currently run in excess of $100 million a year in total research funding. About 2/3 of that's from the National Institutes of Health. Another third of that comes largely from industry and various foundations, and really covers a broad spectrum of disease topics and activities across the campus. But as you can see, we've grown that quite tremendously over the years. A couple areas that we're fairly unique in. We are one of 29 nationally designated Alzheimer's disease centers for doing research around Alzheimer's disease. We're one of 62 programs in the country to have a clinical and translational science award, which confuses everybody. But basically that is a project to help facilitate taking discoveries out of the lab and getting those into the clinics and getting those to treatment options for our patients. And then our cancer program, our NCI designated cancer program is one of 68 in the country. And again, that is a research grant that really helps us support our research infrastructure and things such as our Midwest Cancer Alliance, which is a research program that covers 19 hospitals across the state of Kansas and allows us to run the national cancer trials for treatment trials in all 19 hospitals across the state of Kansas. There's not another one like that in the United States. But we're one of only 21 institutions in the country to have all three of these programs. So again, we've had some good successes in recent years, and I think to the great benefit of the state. When Governor Brownback was elected, he came to the institution and said, you guys have a great school, but we really think you need to be a top-ranked school. And his definition of top-ranked was, we want you to be in the top 25 by U.S. News & World Report rankings. That's always been a bit of a challenge for us because these rankings, the methodology of those, depending on which category it is, in this case is about 40% reputational. So they ask people around the country, obviously predominantly on the coast, about reputation. And we've always been challenged by that. So our efforts really have been around the data. You look at the data by which we're ranked and try to do the best that we can do on that. So in 2015, for the first time, we broke in the top 25, and that was in primary care. Schools of medicine get ranked in two ways, primary care and research. We're now in the top 25 in primary care, and we're making progress on the research side. So we continue to work very hard on that. As you can see from these numbers, the schools of nursing and health professions have been top 25 for decades, actually. We have one of the best schools of health professions in the entire United States. And a number of our programs, 4 of our programs are in the top 10 in the United States, and our School of Nursing is certainly very top ranked as well. And I just mentioned previously, again, there's always some confusion about our clinical enterprise with the hospital and the physician practice plan. Those are not state-supported entities. That's true of the physician practice plan here at the School of Medicine as well. Our faculty practice in School of Medicine here does not get state support. All these entities survive on their own, just like every other clinical organization within the state. Having said that, our clinical engine in Kansas City has grown significantly and has gained significant expertise, and we have a number of programs that are really very nationally recognized, in particular bone marrow transplantation and solid organ transplantation. And we now take care of patients from all 50 states and internationally as well. So that program has certainly become recognized, and we're taking care of patients from everywhere in the country, including all 105 counties in the state of Kansas and certainly most of Missouri for that matter. And the hospital also gets ranked, U.S. News Report and World Report, again a challenge from the governor to be a top-ranked hospital as well. And same problem, about a third of these rankings are reputational. We get usually 0 reputation points out of 100. But again, it's based on performance. So we have focused on our patient satisfaction, our quality, our mortality, the other data that goes into these. And we are one, they look at 4,700 different hospitals with this, and we're one of 16 in the United States that is ranked in the top 50 in all 12 specialties that they rank. Again, and we've just done that by focusing on quality and taking the best care of our patients possible. We certainly are a fairly significant economic engine as well. Again, talking specifically about the Kansas City campus now, between the university side, the physician practice side, and the hospital, we have about 11,000 employees, gross revenues of $1.5 billion. And the economic impact, of course, is much bigger than that. We also have had a strong focus on trying to commercialize our innovations and our discoveries in the labs. And we have an incubator on campus. We now have 21 startup companies in that incubator. 5 of those companies were started by our faculty through discoveries that they've made. The others are companies that wanted to be close to us so they could collaborate with people that are in our labs and in our institution. And we've had 5 graduates out of this incubator now. All those companies so far at least have stayed in the state of Kansas as well. And that's certainly the target of what we're trying to do with that. We certainly have our challenges. Everybody's got their challenges, and I'll touch on those a little bit. This is what we're kind of our cycle of state funding, which is always a topic as we get ready to go back into a new legislative session. And not surprisingly, post-2008, we all took a pretty good hit, and that's just the reality of the economy, and that's true across industries. And we've been fairly flat since that point in time, and we're certainly grateful to the legislature and the governor for holding us fairly harmless the last couple of years when there have been some really challenging times with the state budget. But having said that, obviously inflation's not flat, and so as we look at what we've done in recent years, and if we look at that from an inflation-adjusted standpoint and go back to 1999, our funding is down about 27% from where we were in 1999. And yet we've been able to do a number of really good things. We've increased our student enrollment by 36%. We've achieved our NCI designation, our Alzheimer's Disease Center designation, our research grants, and we've opened the Wichita, or expanded the Wichita campus and opened the Salina campus. Again, all those in a setting of really significantly decreased state support. Not an easy thing to do, and also not easy to grow your research enterprise with the current federal environment. So historically, NIH is the largest funder of biomedical research in the world, actually, which is certainly one of our biggest competitive advantages as a country as we go forward, is the innovation that comes out of this country and out of this research. And historically, about 25 to 35% of applications for funding would get funded. It's very competitive, always been a very competitive process, as it should be. Only the best science should get funded through this. But as a number of things have happened federally, those numbers have gotten much, much tighter. And we currently are getting funded at anywhere between a 9 to 12% of our grants are getting funded at this point in time. So it's a very competitive environment. And yet we've had some great success as we've seen some growth in our research. And that just speaks to the quality, I think, of our researchers. And actually something that we do better in Kansas than most places in the country, which is what we call team science. It's collaborative science. It's getting together with other people in our communities across the state, other institutions, and different types of science to get together to put together proposals and programs of research. And we've done very well as a result of that. Yeah, but continues to be a struggle for us. We've kind of had all these successes despite these financial challenges through just trying to be much better at what we do. Over the last, since 1999, we've reduced our administrative overhead by 45%. And most of that, obviously, FTEs. We've reduced our FTEs by 45% in our administration. We've done that by just getting much leaner, much more efficient, and much more effective, and making sure we had the right people to do the right jobs as well. As I mentioned, we've grown our student enrollment. We've grown our research dollars by over 85%. And grown our faculty number by 70% by leveraging all our different missions together. Let me talk just a little bit now about your local program here. How many people here know you have a School of Medicine in Wichita? Good. All right, we're making progress. It's only been here for 40 years. I don't know. How many of you know it because you drive by it on 135? Yeah, exactly. There's also a School of Pharmacy there, if you didn't know. And that's a branch campus of the School of Pharmacy in Lawrence. But we've had the School of Medicine here in town since about the mid-'70s. And it was really the brainstorm of a number of the key physician leaders in Wichita who really felt that the community would greatly benefit from having a medical school campus here in Wichita, and in part from a fairly self-serving standpoint. And we know this in most communities, that the schools, if you can get your claws into kids when they're in education, they're much more likely to stay locally. And that's the best recruiting stream that you can possibly have, is the people that you're training yourself. And so they recognized that, to their credit, back in the mid-'70s, and wrote the proposal came out of Wichita and was supported and started. As I mentioned, started as a 2-year program and really community-based. In Kansas City, it's a very traditional academic medical center. You have the University Hospital, and then you have the school right next to it, and that's kind of where everybody works. This is very dispersed and community-based. We have a core, very good faculty of the School of Medicine who are responsible primarily for the education and the core education of those students, as well as clinical practice, but we have a widespread participation by the physicians across this community. Christopher, do you know how many volunteer faculty you have in Wichita?
We have on average 1,000.
Yeah, over 1,000 docs, who participate. Now, some of those are part-time faculty. Alex Amer, for example, is our chair of surgery. He has a large private group that he works in, but spends some of his time with us and is part-time faculty with us and oversees surgical education for our school, both for resident and student. And then a lot of them just quite frankly volunteer their time, which is truly remarkable, and do a very, very good job of it. So we've got a long history of that here in Wichita, and it really has given exposure to quite a number of students to this part of the state and to this community, which has enhanced their ability to recruit and retain. So as I mentioned, we have a core faculty, we have part-time faculty, we have volunteer faculty, we have students, and we have residents. Our clinical partners here are the 3 hospitals, Via Christi, Wesley, and the VA, all participate in the education of both residents and students here, and have really been incredibly supportive partners for a very long time, obviously. We talked about our plans for growth, and a big part of our plans for growth are right here in Wichita, and it's really because of the success that this campus has. 2 things. One, it has potential. I mean, it has capacity. It's such a large medical community here. It does have capacity to increase our educational operation here. But it's also got the highest success rate of all our campuses in terms of keeping physicians in the state of Kansas. And so the students that come through this campus, 64% of them stay in the state of Kansas. National average for that's about 35%. So it's almost double what happens nationally. And again, I think it's just because they have such a wonderful experience within this community. We also produce a tremendous number of primary care physicians, and I showed you that slide of what our deficit was in primary care. That's a lot of what we need. We need everything else as well. I could show you a similar slide in specialties. It would look similar, but our biggest deficit is really in primary care. And this campus is number 6 in the United States in the production of primary care physicians. Just this campus, not KU. KU overall is number 2 in the United States in the production of family physicians. So again, this campus in particular has great success at producing students and subsequently residents who not only stay in the state, but about 20 to 25% of those are out in the rural parts of the state. And so again, addressing where our needs are greatest, we feel could be most effectively done right here in Wichita by continuing to expand our operation here. This is a very long process, and I just put this up because it reminds me of the timeline and all the pain we went through to do that, because we started that effort in 2005 to actually start it in 2011 and then graduate our first class this last year. And obviously, you know, economically, the state and the world's been on a bit of a roller coaster during that time, but you can't really derail the process. Once you get going, you have to stick with it. So our plan, our ideal, as I mentioned, is to go to a full 4-year campus in Wichita. We'd like to have 65 to 70 students a year, all 4 years right here in Wichita. We know that we can do that. We've proven that we can graduate a very high quality class with all 4 years here. We do have some needs to accomplish that. We certainly don't have the space for it, so we're going to need about 45,000 square feet of more space, and we're certainly going to need to work with the community to accomplish that. And we do need some state support really to cover the operations side of things. We're going to have to increase our core teaching faculty considerably to do that. Those first 2 years are very teaching intensive, on-site and one-to-one. and the paradigm is changing to much more active learning. So we are going to need support to do that. We've been working on that for about 3 years already. It's been tough times in the state, and we've got some work to do, but certainly what we need probably over 2 years is somewhere close to about $5 million a year to accomplish that full expansion. So that will continue to be part of our conversation with the folks in Topeka. They've actually been very supportive. They recognize the value, they recognize the need. Obviously, they're working with a difficult budget right now, and we know this isn't going to happen overnight, but this is where we're going to ultimately need to get to accomplish this goal. I would just say one more thing about the economic engine of it. Your Chamber of Commerce made a visit to Austin last year. I don't know if you remember reading about this in the Wichita Business Journal. Dave Porter, who is the head of the Austin, Texas Chamber of Commerce, used to help run yours here, and so knows this community extremely well. And that was one of the reasons, I think, why they decided that Austin was a good place to visit. But certainly in Austin, one of the things that they've done, they did their economic development plan for their community, and they decided that investment in a school of medicine was a huge way to diversify the economy of that community. And so they're actually starting medical school from scratch in Austin right now to open probably in the next 3 to 5 years. That's an asset that you already have here in this community and would be fairly easy to expand upon. And we certainly agree that it would be a great economic engine for your community as well. And I think that's kind of what I had from a high-level overview, and I'd be very happy to take any questions or comments or concerns. Yes, sir.
What is the totality of your interaction with the famed Mayo Clinic in Minnesota there?
What is our level of interaction with them?
Yes, I'm sure that you're.
Well, I stole one of their leaders to be our new executive dean of the School of Medicine. The Mayo Clinic is a very unique model, and there's not a lot of physicians in this crowd, but they could espouse on this for quite a while. It's not a very easily transportable model, having said that. But what the Mayo has done very well historically has been very team-based medicine, very collaborative medicine, and focused with a high focus on quality. And we know that that does work. And so we've tried to learn those lessons and import those into our systems and to what we're teaching our students and our residents for transforming healthcare. I really don't see us from a true business operational standpoint taking on the Mayo model, but certainly a lot of what the Mayo has learned over the years. I will tell you that in all those areas of performance that we talked about, we outperform the Mayo Clinic in most of those. So I think we've taken those lessons to heart and will continue to do so and try to do so.
Do you have a brief summary of the pros and cons of Medicaid expansion?
I knew somebody would go there. Boy, it's complicated, to say the least. I will tell you from a healthcare provider, we're pretty pragmatic. It's not really a political question to us. It's a financial question to us. With the laws of the land as they exist today, it's going to be pretty tough for us to survive not to ultimately do it unless the laws of the land change. And so the question is, what's the likelihood of that occurring? And I'm not a very good crystal ball person. But the economics of it, just at a very basic level, and I'm going to speak for my hospital partners, and I'm speaking for every hospital partner in the state of Kansas, the challenge that this has put them in particular is the way the expansion of healthcare through the Affordable Care Act was funded was by redistributing money. And money that went to hospitals to help compensate for patients who had no insurance came from the federal government to help support that so that our hospitals could do that, as they are required by law to do that. They can't not do that. So what they did was take that money away from the hospitals, or it's phased, but they're in the process of that right now, to pulling that money back out of the hospitals, and they were going to push it into Medicaid expansion. So our hospitals are kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. They're seeing that money go away. They're not seeing it come back on the other side, and they're taking a big hit. When their competitors across state lines are not. And so just from a pragmatic standpoint, we're probably not sustainable to not do anything indefinitely. I think we're going to see some real challenges. What's the fix? There's 30 answers to that question, but it is a dilemma for us to be dealt with. Ignoring it isn't going to fix it, that's for sure.
Thank
Sure.
Try to be as brief as I can. I want to thank you for a couple things. In 1994, about the same time you came in, my wife and I went to attend KU Med School. She got the degree, but we both went. We had 3 kids.
It is a dual effort, to be sure. So I congratulate you both.
And in 1997, I entered the facility for 17 hours of surgery, 18-day stay, and I now have 10 fingers because of the efforts of the KU reconstructive surgery staff. So I want to thank you very much for a very great staff.
Absolutely.
And then she got a degree. She now serves here in Wichita as a pediatric hospitalist. My question is, because of that, what is the role that KU Med Center going to play in the new pediatric hospital at Wesley?
And I will address that the best I can, which is a very large role. The pediatrics department of the Wichita School of Medicine is largely the peds department for Wesley Hospital, and staffs the majority of their clinics and the majority of their inpatient operations, not exclusively, but a large part. And Brian Pate, who's our chair of pediatrics, started with us last year. We recruited away from Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City, has come down to head that program, and is working very closely with the leadership at Wesley to help develop the programs within that. So we will be very closely interdigitated with them through this process. We think that's a great opportunity for the training of our students and our residents, and for really helping to continue to provide the best pediatric care possible, and not just for Wichita. You know, you guys provide health care for more than half of the state of Kansas. I don't know if you realize that. Healthcare in Wichita, and the Sedgwick County Medical Society has commissioned Wichita State to do the studies, but it's the second largest economic engine in this community. And that's you can consider that an export in the sense that you're exporting services across the entire state. Now, the patients come here to get them, but in reality, you're bringing the patients here to get that care and helps do that. So it's a very big economic engine for this state as well, and I think that pediatric hospital is going to be a great asset.
A number of years ago, I served on a committee with the Wichita campus of the KU School of Medicine, and the committee reviewed the use of laboratory animals in research, and at that time there was significant research, including primary research being done here. The committee was disbanded because of funding, and I assume the researchers as well. I'm just curious if there's any of that type of research being done here now.
You know, there's not a lot of bench research being done on the campus here right now. You're absolutely right. I think over the years, and a lot of that preceded my time here, but we do have a lot of community-based research going on here. A lot of research looking at outcomes with patients with different treatment modalities and prevention modalities, and a lot of public health research. And the advantage of that kind of research is you don't need big research facilities, which are extraordinarily expensive to both build and maintain, particularly in the current environment. And yet there's actually tremendous interest in this by the funding agencies across the board in being much more patient-oriented and patient outcome-oriented in terms of its results. So we really think that's our opportunity for growth and research on this campus, and Tracy Collins and many others on this campus are already doing that kind of work, and we hope to continue to grow that.
On your slide that showed, I think it was about a total of roughly 3,500 medical professionals if you added up the physicians, nurses, and other professionals. Do you have any idea, say after maybe 10 years, how many of those folks are still in Kansas? And conversely, if we have any relationship with any of the other thinly populated states where we're helping train medical professionals specifically for, say, another state, like I know we're kind of on the other side of this in the dental community.
Right, absolutely. So so we have about 3,500 in the employed category. That includes staff, you're right, clinical personnel, but also our physicians within the system. We have about 3,300 students, about 800 of those are in the School of Medicine, and roughly slightly more than half of those will end up staying around in the state of Kansas. Actually, the number's quite a bit higher if you include the Kansas City metro area. But if you look strictly at the state line, about 2/3 off this campus will be within the state of Kansas. And we do have pipeline programs across the state. We've tried many, and we continue to try and will continue to do many different efforts to try and reach those more thinly populated parts of the state. We have looked at best practices at other states who are in similar situations. Quite honestly, they're usually looking to us because we've been more successful at it than most of them, and we've been at it longer than a lot of them have. There's a medical student loan program, which is really a loan repayment program that the state of Kansas has. It's highly effective. And that's a one-for-one. It's very much what I did in the military. I went through medical school on a Navy scholarship and paid back one-for-one, plus a lot of time in the reserves, but that's how I paid for my education. This does the same thing, but instead of serving your time in the military, you serve your time in an underserved part of the state. And so those students who go through get their medical education paid for by the state, and then they go out into rural communities, underserved areas, to pay their time back. And we know that actually 70% of those folks stay either in that community or another one in the adjacent areas. And so a very highly effective way to, as an example, to do that, and states are starting to replicate that model. We also have what we call our Rural Scholars Program, which is a program that identifies the best and the brightest out across the state of Kansas and rural parts of the state very early on. And if they maintain their grades through college and do well enough on their exams, they have automatic admission into our school. Again, trying to pull those folks from the rural parts of the state and get them an education, as they're more likely to go back. We also know life's more complicated than that. If we drag them to Kansas City and then they meet somebody, a significant other, and they get married, and life gets complicated really fast with 3 kids, so we know that that's a barrier to them going back to their communities, which is the concept behind both the Salina campus of never bringing them to the big city, and the Wichita effort here, because we know it remains ties close enough that a lot of people do have every intention of going back and do. And so, it takes all those things for us to do it. Dental's really an interesting issue, and I'd love to pick your brain on that one a little bit.
Yeah, I know Medicare is really cutting physicians' pay, and it's such a big population. So I think if you could educate people on what it takes to be a doctor, how much money goes out, and how much they're not getting paid, because people are going to choose different professions, they're going to get squeezed out of the market, and I think most public are aware of what's going on until the doctors start leaving.
It is a tough time right now, in that the economics are getting challenging. Medical education is extraordinarily expensive. In fact, we went through this exercise last summer at the request of the state legislature, and they asked us for every degree that every university provides, what's the cost of providing that degree? It's a very good question. Very complicated way to answer, or way to try and find an answer, but depending on the assumption that we make, we know it costs us somewhere between $90,000 and $120,000 per year to train a medical student. Our tuition, which is expensive, but about average for a public school, is about $35,000 a year. So there's a pretty significant gap there. And so that is what our state support really goes to, is helping to fund that gap of the cost of the education. For the students, however, it's not uncommon. Our average student finishes with about $170,000 of debt. It would be much higher than that if we didn't have that student loan program, where some of our students are graduating with no debt because of that program. Nationally, that number's well over $200,000, and I personally know people with well over $400,000 of debt coming out of their education as they go into their career. That does influence what they do. And so, as we know, different specialties have different incomes. In part, some of that's length of training, but some of it's also just the way our system's designed. Primary care is not one that pays the highest. And so if you need primary care doctors and you're carrying $400,000 of debt, that doesn't look as attractive to a student, and it does influence their decisions. And so it's all very closely intertwined, and all these things do have impact. It's a great point. Thank you.
Dr. Girod, thank you for your time today. Would you speak to the undergraduate student that's a prospective medical student as to what you're looking for on that application and the things that they should be preparing themselves for at this stage in their life?
Absolutely. So first of all, being the only school in the state of Kansas, we take this very seriously. And so over 90% of our incoming medical students are Kansas residents. That's a very different number anywhere else you go in the country, and part of that is economics. You can charge an out-of-state student a whole lot more money than you can charge an in. But we feel that we've got such a crisis here that we really are not in a position to be doing that, and we need to focus on Kansans. So first of all, living in Kansas is extraordinarily helpful. Having said that, we get probably 500 to 600 qualified Kansans applying every year for our 200 slots. And so it is still very competitive. And so obviously grades, doing well in MCAT scores are important, but they're actually not, our committees look much more holistically than that. They look at background, they look at what your life experience, they look at how much time you've actually spent in medicine to actually even know that that's what you want to do. I mean, it sounds kind of glamorous to people, but if they haven't spent any time in the field, sometimes it's not at all what they thought it was going to be. So we really look for people who have spent time with physicians in their practices, for example, volunteering in emergency rooms and those sorts of activities, and then community service. So it is very much a holistic look that the committee, it's a hard work. I'm not part of that process, and I'm grateful for that because we have way more talented kids than we have the ability to train right now. But we do have a very strong commitment to the state and to our own citizens around that. Thank you.
Thank you again for being here, Doctor. I work primarily in the Medicare market, and I have about a dozen doctors as clients, so they give me their advice and their feedback on what's going on. But one of the things that's fascinating to me is the explosion of the physician's assistant, and at least a couple of my opinionated medical doctor clients are telling me, well, they want collaborative and managed care medicine, but I don't have time to be on the phone. So I hired somebody else to collaborate for me, and that's my physician's assistant. But basically, could you speak to that? The explosion of the physician's assistant, and what are the differences in the authorities that a physician's assistant would have as compared to the physician?
So this is not the politically correct term, but physician's assistants and advanced nurse practitioners have been labeled, and I don't think it's even appropriate, but as physician extenders, and it does help leverage the medical community to reach a much broader swath. Obviously, they don't have the same level of education and the same level of training and experience, and so as the system's designed, and it's morphing all over the place in the United States right now as to what that relationship is. Traditionally, it's been a physician has been a supervisor of those or several of those, and there are limits in each state and how many you can supervise and what appropriate levels of supervision are. And yet, as time goes on, those folks are gaining more and more skills and have a sense that they can do a more broad practice with less supervision. And so there's a tension there that we need to sort out because we got a problem. I mean, this problem isn't going to go away with us just increasing the number of students that we're training. It's a way bigger problem than that. We do need to figure out how to practice very collaboratively with all those folks and figure out what that right balance is of supervision and oversight versus independent practice for our physician extenders who are extraordinarily talented people. And you may not know this, physician assistance program, Wichita State has a great PA program right here in Wichita. That was an outgrowth of the Vietnam War. That was a program that was established nationally to try and give a pathway for our vets who were medics in the war and sometimes were better than a lot of our surgeons because of the experience that they gained in the field, and try and give them a pathway that we can incorporate them into the medical field. So again, an extraordinarily talented group of people. We still train those medics all the time. I worked with a ton of medics in the Navy, and they're extraordinarily talented people. So it was a way to give a pathway for those folks to mainstream medicine, and it's very important. But we've got, there's a lot of political tension around that with the different interest groups. But to be successful, we're going to have to figure out the way to leverage everybody. We need everybody. We definitely need everybody. We know that we're going to be somewhere between 50 and 150,000 physicians short in the United States by 2020, and 2020 is right around the corner. And so the answer, for us to start expanding schools, we need to do that, but the pipeline for that is 8 years off before we even start to see a dent from that. So it's going to take all of us working together to make this happen.
Yes, my question was actually about physician assistants and nurse practitioners. I'm a graduate of Wichita State's PA program.
Excellent.
Now, one of the reasons or one of the uses of nurse practitioners and PAs has been to help get out into rural and underserved areas where there's a lack of physicians. However, over the last few years, there's been somewhat of a degree chasing mentality in which we've raised the degree requirements. For example, the PA program is now a master's degree. The nurse practitioner is a PhD. Even physical therapists now are PhDs. I'm concerned that over the years that's going to actually make it harder for people or less likely for people to go out in those rural underserved areas because research actually indicates that. Do you have any concerns about that, the long-term effects of this degree chasing, and should we reverse that trend?
You know, well, I know that I don't have the answer to that. You know, the two sides of that argument are by going to doctorate level training, the hope is to expand in the independent practice portion of things, at least from and most of this is driven by the PA organizations and the nurse practitioner organizations as a way to try and gain appropriate legitimacy for increased independent practice. But I think you're absolutely right that it's longer in school, it's more debt, and you're right that it's less likely that those folks carrying that debt are going to go out to a rural part of the state where it's a little bit, where typically the incomes are not quite as high. So it can be a vicious cycle. I'm not sure I know the answer to that, but that's certainly where the trend has gone, as you've pointed out.
Change the gears a little bit. Can you explain a little bit about your Alzheimer's program? Is it research, clinical trials? What is it that you're doing with that?
Yes, it's all those things. And we certainly have some very basic science research going on in the neurosciences overall, which actually Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, and ALS, and all those things are neurodegenerative processes, and we have a very big research program in that. But our Alzheimer's Disease Center is much more clinical trial based, and we actually, our team in that center are actually the world experts on exercise and the study of exercise and the prevention of Alzheimer's. We don't have a cure for Alzheimer's at this point. I mean, we believe our best strategy right now is prevention of Alzheimer's, or else we're going to be overwhelmed by it. So it's all those things, and hopefully we'll continue to grow. And the nice part of being part of that nationally recognized consortium is we also have the ability to trade trials between those centers, and so we can bring more clinical trials in for our patients also. Big problem.
Thank you very much for your comments here, especially on Alzheimer's. My question is related to that as well. You say we don't have a cure, but do we know better now than we did before about the cause? And what do you see on the horizon? Are we looking at a possible cure in the distant future or even near future?
You know, I think, and I'm as an ear, nose, and throat cancer surgeon, I'm going to deviate out of my area of expertise very quickly here. But you know, what we know is that Alzheimer's, like cancer, is not one disease. We give it one disease because of how it manifests, but even as it manifests, it's very different. There's mild, there's severe, there's rapidly progressive, there's very slowly progressive. We actually know that each of those is a separate disease. And that probably it's going to take several cures. Just like cancer, you know, the more we learn about cancer, the more we know and understand the variability of that and the number of different times we're going to have to cure it to be successful. We know it's going to be the same with Alzheimer's. I do think we'll get pretty close to be able to tackle some of those sooner rather than later. I think there's other ones that it's going to take us longer to figure out.
I want to talk to you afterwards.
Sure, happy to.
You might mention, is there any collaboration between the School of Veterinary Science, K-State, we've got medical at Wichita State, and KU? Is there collaboration? Is there some crossover there?
There definitely is in a couple areas, and you know, our part of the country has now become known as the Animal Health Corridor. And 35% of animal health services and businesses live between Columbia, Missouri and Manhattan, Kansas. That is huge. 35% of the economy of animal health occurs in that corridor. And the overlap between animal health science and human health science is actually pretty profound, as you might imagine. And so we have increasingly tried to build collaborations, mostly on a disease format. So for example, our Midwest stem cell treatment therapy has a large contingent out of K-State. They're working in the vet school around stem cell therapy for animal diseases. Covers very nicely what we do with humans as well, and a lot of collaboration around that. K-State now has a campus in the Kansas City metro area, in the Olathe campus that was supported by the Johnson County Education Triangle Tax, and we have a lot of programs going on between those two campuses as well, cancer being one of those. Animal cancers and human cancers are very, very closely related, and frankly, we can get drugs and therapies through the animal model a whole lot faster than we can into people. And in doing that, really break down some of the barriers of subsequently getting it into people. But the cost of doing it into animals is much less. And so it's a much more rapid way to the marketplace than it is trying to do it for people. So we've worked very closely, actually, with vet schools both at Columbia, Missouri and at K-State on cancer trials for animals.
Dr. Douglas Girod.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Hey, that's great.
Thank you
Thank
for
you very
being
much.
here today.
It's a pleasure.